All right, keeping the train going, trying to keep it on time. Welcome to, this might be my favorite name for a session, maybe ever. In the lunch theme, I don't know about you guys, I'm like Joey from Friends. My favorite food is sandwiches. So how the sandwich is made, a site selection case study. All right, so help me welcome to the stage Edward Burch, Director of Business Development. He's with the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. And then John Longshore, he is the Senior Marketing Director with Newmark. So I'm not going to read your bios, guys. I think most of us know who you are, and I'm sure you're going to chime in a little bit of that. So with you guys, I'm going to get out of your way. Go ahead.
John, good to see you, sir. Are we
Always
rocking the
look,
socks?
always good. I'm on. I hear it.
Again, I think we should draw attention to the sock game.
We did. We definitely planned.
Yeah.
A little orange.
The TriStar.
It's the only time that I will wear orange that is not Clemson orange.
Oh, go Vols.
So.
I mean, come on now.
Sure.
Yeah, I know you like Tennessee, though.
I love
Our
Tennessee.
state is pretty awesome, and we got a great project here that we're going to talk about.
Yes, so how the sandwich is made, a site selection case study, just a quick intro. So I work with Newmark in our global strategy team, and the way in which we like to position ourselves is management consulting meets real estate. So site selection consultant doesn't seem to really fully encompass everything that we do, right? It seems very specific. We just select sites. There's a lot more guiding and nurturing of a project and the client along the way to help them make the best decision for their long-term plans.
And this was a really unique client, too, and one that, dare I say, a lot of people in the audience probably have encountered their product at least once.
So you'll see here a couple of nice looking sandwiches that you have probably had before at your favorite green and white coffee shop. And once the pandemic hit, we seemed to be eating a lot more of them using that nice little app along the way. We were hungry, we needed to get out of the house, so a lot of sandwiches were being eaten.
And the company is SK Food Group. That's their U.S. entity, but they have an international presence, which is Premium Brands, and that's based in Canada. Publicly traded company and a good footprint here in the U.S. But, you know, John, this kind of, COVID and a lot of things allowed them to take a look at what their model was and see where the demand was, and that's really kind of how this project came about.
Yeah, that's right. So SK had been a client of Newmark's for a few years. Before they decided to go forward on a new project, we had helped them out with some existing labor studies, so trying to help them position themselves better for where they currently were. We had helped them with some incentives work in Arizona. As you can see on the map, you've got the West Coast covered. They've got a location in Reno. That was their first location. They actually were doing food trucks before food trucks were popular out of Seattle, serving the folks at Boeing, and ultimately one thing led to another. Started making sandwiches and have continued to grow. They opened up a facility in the Midwest near Columbus, Ohio, and then in Phoenix, and so that really leaves a pretty good-sized hole in the Southeast.
And the breakfast sandwiches were really the product that they were looking to continue to expand on, although they did have a pretty diverse array of other pre-made sandwiches that you could buy at the stores.
Sandwiches, charcuterie boards,
right.
We seem to really like adult Lunchables.
Adult Lunchables, oh yeah. They had a pretty good portfolio that they showed us, and it's like, oh.
That's right. So it's not just the SK brand. There's others as well within that portfolio. So quick overview on the project overview. You can see on the right some of the initial project parameters. Not really going to go through them. You can see at the bottom 360 full-time employees. I stole the picture you see here from their website. It didn't ask for permission, but they do like me enough. So it really simplifies everything that really mattered to them. So if there's the trends, you see that. We began eating more sandwiches. Who was eating the sandwiches? Where was the growth? But really, the two drivers for location were beginning to be around the supply chain. Where did they see the growth going? Who were their current customers? Who were future customers? And then labor. They have a very unique model in terms of the types of folks who they're trying to hire. And they've done some interesting work with refugee groups at their other locations, but they needed a lot of people, and their people and the culture that they implemented with those people is really one of the driving factors of the entire project.
And then that allowed you to then focus on a particular region for this project and really kind of have a laser-like approach to say these are the markets that we want to explore for this project.
Yeah, that's right. So during our panel yesterday, during the young professional panel, which half the people there weren't necessarily young professionals, my wife did tell me, she's like, "You're participating in a young professional panel. Aren't you too old for that?" And it really hurt my heart a little bit.
Ouch.
That I'm realizing that I've now hit, like, I'm over that age. It's just a shock. So the question was asked, what do you do really before the RFI comes out? How are you working with the client before we even know the project exists? And so this is just a quick snapshot of, on the left, seeing some center of gravity analysis. So they gave us at least some volumes, potential customers, where it might be going, and we ran kind of two different scenarios on where that kind of the center of gravity would be. And so Panthersville, Georgia is really just right near Atlanta. I don't know exactly where Panthersville is, but that was the center for that one particular model. And then Knoxville, Tennessee. So you can kind of see, the kind of sweet spot of where we might want to be logistically. And as we begin looking at where do we want to make sure we get RFIs sent to and responses from, we began doing a kind of a drive time analysis from interstates, proximity to certain highways. So you can see that on the map on the right. And so as we began to think about our search region, and as we're going to go into the states, we begin to communicate, this is the area that we want to see sites from.
So the RFP's gone out, and then you're getting dozens of submissions back in from these states that fit within this market.
That's right. And then you can see here a kind of a breakdown of the sites that were submitted. So we even were in Alabama, North Carolina, kind of centered around that I-75, 85 corridor, and trying to stay within a certain distance to the interstate, which we had specified in the RFI process. We had 61 total sites initially submitted. As the project progressed and morphed a little bit, we began supplementing as well with some potential existing buildings, working with our brokers to try identify some other options along the way. So it was this initial 61 became a little bit more as we moved it on.
And there's a certain formula that you all kind of take into account to help downsize and be able to say, these are the sites that we want to go visit in person, and workforce was really the biggest factor of them all.
Yeah, so just a quick snapshot. This is an oversimplification of an evaluation process, but each site that comes in, we take them through an initial fatal flaw screening. So we had a pretty large world of sites that we were working with initially, needed to screen those down into something more manageable, which we then take them through our multi-criteria decision analysis, which is a kind of a mouthful. We call it MCDA. It's just a decision-making matrix where you have different variables that are weighted and scored accordingly relative to one another. And as you can see in this example, workforce and talent was over 50% of the qualitative comparison for the sites. We also did a financial model, which most of that being driven by logistics and labor costs, but really a lot of the sites that rose to the top were driven by kind of that MCDA and the labor market that we wanted to be in.
And certainly there are probably some local economic developers out there that always want to know, well, why did my site get cut? And this maybe just kind of gives an idea that there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of analysis, and that there's a lot of detail that allows you guys to be able to say, these are our best sites, and unfortunately not all of the ones submitted make the cut.
That's right. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of data points kind of hidden within this pretty little colorful pie chart. So it's just a little bit of an oversimplification, but it was the primary question from the client was on workforce and talent.
And the timeline was relatively quick, as some projects may go, but over the course of a year, a lot can happen and change.
Yeah, so there's always that question of the RFI going out, what's happening in between, and then what's going on with this project, is it coming back around? Mm-hmm. So the timeline for this one, in terms of when we kicked it off with the client, we get the RFI, we've got a good pace, a little bit of back and forth, getting to a short list at the end of the year. And then it wasn't until June that we actually did site visits. So from the time the RFI was distributed to site visits was 9 months, give or take. And so by the time the client wanted to then get back going again, you guys know this, is the real estate market, especially for what these guys needed, was constantly shifting. Mm-hmm. So when they came back and said, we're ready to go, we said, okay, well, we need to go back and make sure that some of these sites are still available. So sites that were on the short list had been transacted. There were options put on them, were under control, so those had to go away. Other sites that had been under some sort of control and the option had gone away or whatever, it became available. So we had to kind of relook again at the search region to decide, okay, what sites really should we go visit. I'd like to say, in the nicest way, there's always the site selection funnel. You've probably seen it. We'd like to just walk them through the funnel. This was a client where we kind of like just pushing you down the funnel a little bit to make the decision. And so it was actually in between the RFI going out and then the site visits where you came on board because Merrill decided to go over to the dark side with TVA.
Oh, TVA.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, we're very fortunate to have TVA in our state, and we got a great set of team members that we work with there. But when you guys came back, you came back with almost a whole new project.
Came back with a whole new project. September 2021, you can see on the left the specs, and then on the right what changed, and a big jump in the number of jobs that were projected.
I mean, we already had a pretty tight labor market, so to go from 340 to 840 was a pretty big leap. So workforce was already at a premium, and the importance of a community to showcase its workforce was going to be crucial for this project no matter what. But the company really needed those communities to show their work and say, where are we going to get these employees that we so badly want and need, and some of those demographics that you kind of touched on earlier. That was quite a task, but we had a community that stepped up to the challenge.
Yeah, that's right. And the one thing that got added in to the project that has been talked about by many communities and some other companies at a very high level. This company was very serious about a planned on-site daycare, and in really having that set themselves apart within whatever community they go to, but also help them retain their workers.
You covered a lot of territory.
Yeah, so a little, what are we doing behind the scenes, right? There's part of us is, the analysis and the reporting and spreadsheets and all the due diligence, et cetera. But then there's the planning of the site visits and just the logistics of it, which is not necessarily my strongest suit. My wife's kind of the planner of the family, so I always have to go to her like, does this make sense? But so we did this nice, pretty kind of circle around, kind of Appalachia, right, cutting through the mountains and back up around. I will say that if you try to rent one of these Sprinter vans, at least in the upstate of South Carolina, right before the summer gets going, it's almost nearly impossible because all the youth groups have rented them out for the entire summer. And so I'm calling to every rental company in at least an hour and a half drive time. And I'm like, please, do you have one? Like, no, we rented them out to church so-and-so. So I called on my buddy who's a youth pastor who pulled some strings, who called one of his youth pastors to return one of these back to the Enterprise, and Enterprise then hooked me up. So there's a little bit of that that's going on in between of like, we got to make sure that we all get there safely in the right vehicle. So it all worked out. I learned how to, drive this guy around, and it was fun.
That's fantastic. Now, are there any Buc-ee's fans out there? I think they'll like this next picture.
Oh yeah, so we were driving down the interstate, and my coworker turns to him and says, turns to our client and says, "Have you ever been to a Buc-ee's?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh." And they're like, "No,
they don't know what they're missing,
we've never
though.
been." And so we took them in, and they had a heyday. They were buying, Beaver swag for their kids.
Did you get your Beaver onesie pajamas?
I didn't know. No, I did not. But
John.
some shorts may have been purchased at some other time. And I don't think you can see it here on the.
Yeah, point it out to me.
If maybe you can see it here nicely if this light doesn't blind me. So I took a rock about, maybe like a mango size rock, somewhere between an avocado and a mango. Dropped the client off. Everything had gone great with the vehicle, and I'm emerging back onto the interstate. And after you get from the airport, right, you're merging back on, trying to get back home to Greenville. You got everybody else and their mothers just trying to get on this interstate. And I see this one rock kind of go across it, and I was like, that's too big of a rock to be on the interstate. And I look to the right, and there's a construction vehicle on a trailer bed that had just come off the construction site. And I had this initial thought of, I should move.
Yep.
And then as I looked to think, like, oh, no, can't move yet, and I turn back, this rock is being launched, and I just embrace it, and just wham, and just kind of splintered the whole windshield. And
It held up, though, somewhat, although I bet that crack probably got a little bit bigger as you were going along.
yeah, I returned it to the enterprise, right? Like, I'd done all this work to, like, secure this vehicle, and I get back, and I'm like, hey, man, like,
Sorry.
I took a rock, and, he's like, oh, it's not that bad. And then he goes up to it, and he goes, oh. Good thing you got the insurance part of it, bought that. So it all worked. It all worked out, and then we did the next trip and got, no incidents the next time.
Now, as far as the decision-making process, you weigh a lot of different factors, obviously, and this next kind of chart that you have here really kind of illustrates it.
Yeah, I say this a little tongue-in-cheek because there's so much data and information that goes in behind the final decision and selection of a location. We've done interview after interview with local employers, meeting with utilities. But at the end of the day, it comes down to all the qualitative elements and cost. And so you're trying to optimize both. And you've seen a 2x2. In this case, you want to be in the top right of this chart. All right, you want to have the best qualitative scoring, but also favorable cost. And you can tell the green dot is the most favorable location of the three finalists. And why we're here today is Cleveland, Tennessee being the winner, being in that top right corner.
And now I get to have fun talking about Tennessee, right?
That's right.
Awesome. So that is the beautiful state of Tennessee. We are so very fortunate to be located where we are. We touch 8 different states. You can get to 60% of the U.S. population in an 11-hour drive. Great system of interstates and highways. If it's not an interstate, there's a lot of 4-lane highways, 2-lane highways, so great connectivity across Tennessee, getting you to those states, especially on the East Coast and the Northeast markets as well. But zooming in a little bit closer, you see the bottom right of the state is Chattanooga, and that's where our focus was, and that's where Cleveland is located just outside of Chattanooga. It's about 30 minutes up Interstate 75. That SK logo is where the project is locating in the Spring Branch Park, which we're going to show you in just a minute. Cleveland could be considered like a suburb of Chattanooga, but they have a pretty robust economy there as far as the projects that they've located, the companies that are already there. But really looking at this regional snapshot, that was where we were going to be able to pitch the idea of employers. And this shows you just some of the top employers in the region. Whirlpool has 1,800 employees located in Cleveland. Anyone like M&Ms? Mars is located in Cleveland. So M&Ms that you're eating here, you're getting them from Cleveland, Tennessee. The peanut butter are my favorite ones. But there already has a history of food production in Cleveland, Tennessee as well. McKee Foods has their corporate headquarters located in the region. Little Debbie is one of their brands. So already got a good kind of economy from a food and beverage standpoint, but also just seeing the diverse industries there with significant jobs, Volkswagen being in Chattanooga as well with about 3,000 jobs. So to add another 840 to the list is definitely a task that we were up to the challenge of, but it really took a lot of buy-in from the community as well. But in order to get to that point, you got to have a site, and you got to get a site shortlisted.
Yeah, before we kind of go to that, to the site itself, within Cleveland, when we were doing our due diligence, we met with a variety of these companies and really trying to understand what is it like to operate, to hire, where are they hiring their people from. So if you kind of saw on the map, right, Cleveland sits just outside of Chattanooga. It's kind of geographically split by like this ravine, so there's almost this, it's I-75 connects it, but there's kind of this distinct break between Chattanooga and then getting to Cleveland. But you have the employers who are in Cleveland, Bradley County. Yes, some people are coming from Chattanooga, but you found a lot of them are pulling from the more rural areas and coming to Cleveland themselves. The Volkswagen, right? This is a big question about how close to the automotive OEM impact of wages and where they pull in their folks from. Would SK be competing for those workers? And what we found was that that there were some folks who were traveling to Volkswagen, but they were kind of pulling from to the west, southwest, and coming up to Volkswagen, and so Cleveland really presented us an opportunity to continue to grow from just that labor market in particular, without having to compete as much against Volkswagen.
But again, the proximity to OEM, that was part of that initial criteria of trying to shortlist, wasn't it?
It was a concern. It was definitely a concern between what was existing and, you had a lot of announcements within, various battery projects, and so companies that were going to then hire 2,000 or 3,000 folks, we couldn't go anywhere, it seemed, in that region without having to ask that question and evaluate the potential impact.
And for EDOs out there, having those HR discussions where the company can really talk to those companies that are already there about their experiences, that's got to be invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. On to the site?
Yeah, let's do it.
On to the site.
So you got to really dive into what all has taken place with this site. And over the span of, over a decade, a lot of work has been put into it, a lot of money, a lot of investment, and a great local economic developer. We don't say his name enough, but Doug Berry down in Bradley is
You should
tremendous.
email him, text him.
Yes.
Doug Berry, he really likes the attention.
I know, we got a picture of him here later.
We thought about putting a picture of him with his contact info, but he would have killed us if we did that. So we don't play favorites, but there is this internal, as you are intaking the sites and evaluating and you see them, you go, this might be a winner.
Yeah.
You kind of you play, like you kind of catalog it, you let the numbers be what they are, you let the process play out. But this was definitely one that when I initially reviewed it with the team, like this is definitely a site that has had a lot of work put in, and was one of the ones that was at the, even that initial MCDA that was close to the top. It wasn't. It may have been top 6 or 7, but it wasn't, number 1 during that initial MCDA. But they didn't get there without a lot of work years before we got there. So we've worked with Doug to make sure we understood the timeline, just simply from the point of acquisition to when SK announced. So that process started in 2009 when they actually optioned the property, but the work to continue to grow industrial opportunities in the county started, there was in the 90s, they were trying to get an additional interchange, which you can see here in this map. So that funding that was approved in, I think, maybe 1999, so, maybe start this process 10 plus years earlier.
It's a long game when it comes to economic development, and for a site like this, which is now starting to see the fruits of all that labor. But from a site selection consultant standpoint, John, talk about just how Doug Barry was a problem solver, and he had meaningful solutions whenever you guys would be talking about, well, how are we going to mitigate these risks?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it wasn't just Doug. He had a team of people who had really nurtured and cared for the development of this site, multiple engineering and construction partners, the local utilities, and everything had effectively been extended to the site, roads paved. The lot where SK went was graded in 2021, so right before they even submitted for the project, the site was graded. We were looking for a site in which that was effectively ready. What exactly is defined as a ready site. There's various definitions of that, but this was a close to ready enough site that we had on our list. A lot of work had been done to prepare it. Not perfect, but a lot of.
Rarely these days is there a perfect site out there. I want to know which community has it.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a perfect site.
No.
That's what we like to say.
But workforce was, the site obviously is a big factor, but it all went back to workforce. And there was something in this community that really stood out to the client. And to us too, honestly.
Ed and I were planning this, and the PI Center, which stands for Partners in Industry and Education.
How do we describe it?
We kept like trying to figure out how do we really put into words. When we showed up to this under renovation former American Uniform manufacturing facility, and it was in process. All we had was a kind of the project manager describing what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And so there weren't any students there. There wasn't anything.
It's an active construction zone.
Yeah, we were walking over a bunch of stuff. Don't step on the nail, watch your step. But they began describing what was going to be on site, and we got in the van, head back down the interstate. I think we were going actually to Chattanooga after we went there. Mm-hmm. And our client gets in, and he's like, obviously it's under construction, but is this normal? And the Newmark team looked and said, I don't think that there's anything out there that's like this. No. And I guess we should just try our best. You maybe give it a little bit.
So, basically, again, think of it as an incubator that also has, K through 12 resources for school, but post-secondary. It has welding instruction. It has, office space for companies to be able to get started. It has a full-size gymnasium where they can have basketball games for kids, but also hiring events. Like, the list goes on and on and on, and you can see kind of the pieces of the pie, if you will. It truly is just an all-encompassing facility that these types of companies can be able to come into, have that community engagement from the ground level, which, that's what SK wanted. They wanted to be able to go somewhere where they had great visibility. They could be able to say, all right, we're gonna utilize this. Mm-hmm. And that was just the first time that you mentioned that we went, but we kept going back, and every time we came back, a little bit more was done until we finally got to see like the finished result, and they committed to being able to have office space and training space for SK at the PI Center. So, would you say that the PI Center was one of the things that got this deal done?
100%. The client had questions around workforce because they've gone to Reno, Columbus, Phoenix, and now, Cleveland, Tennessee is rising to the top. But the PI Center really solidified for them that the resources were going to be there to help to identify and attract the workers needed. For me, the PI Center is the most holistic, embodiment of a community trying, of education and positioning students to be successful, particularly within industry. Right, it encompasses what's called the Goal Academy, which is your at-risk alternative academy, and normally, at least wherever I've been, that's not been integrated really well. It was always kind of off to the side or somewhere else. So the fact that they are in this facility as well, being exposed to Bradley County and surrounding county companies who are there and showing them what could be possible is fantastic. And then they've got on-site mentors from various organizations, including faith-based.
Teaching the soft skills.
Teaching the soft skills, kids who, are just having a hard time at home, they've got people there who care for them.
Yeah.
So for us, it was just phenomenal. And SK has been given, has been given space there to help start up, train folks. So I can't speak highly enough about the Pie Center.
Me neither. And, John, how the sandwich is made, ultimately, it had to deal with a lot of challenges overcome, but a lot of opportunities, and I think, vision by the company and that community buy-in. And as a consultant, what did you think when you saw everybody that came together and just truly went after this project and said, yes, we are going to work toward any solutions? And this is going all the way, we talk about Cleveland a lot, but Chattanooga even came to the table. We were having workforce discussions at the Chattanooga Chamber of Commerce 30 minutes away from Cleveland because, again, it was a regional approach and everybody came to the table.
Yeah, they made us look really good. That's all.
That's what you like.
The engagement from all partners, from elected officials, the council on with the development board, not development, is the
the industrial development
development board, to folks involved at the universities, the technical colleges. Everybody wanted this project. They were all in unison in terms of what needed to be done to land the project and move it on efficiently. And just good people. Just good people. I think that one of the things that we've heard and continue to say is that Cleveland and Bradley County, the partners just made it feel like home. Yep. And that's you can't manufacture that. You can't act your way into it. That has to be a very real thing.
As a project manager, in my 5 years of working in economic development, I've been a big proponent of the intangibles and the feel of a project. And when you're in the bus with the client and you're having those true conversations about, family, school, all those things that truly matter. It's you're asking people to potentially move, relocate. There's a lot of human elements that go into the decision-making process. So I got the sense, especially near the end, that they felt the warm and fuzzies, if you will, from Cleveland. But, even we had another meeting where we got everybody together, including our commissioner, Stuart McWhorter. We all flew down to Cleveland to have our last big meeting with them and just say, hey, what can we do to make this happen? Because there were still some risks that had to be overcome and some gaps that had to be closed in the process.
Yeah, that's right. And, I can't speak highly enough about what Doug did behind the scenes to continue to mitigate some of the risk associated with the site. There was a little blue stream that had been identified, and the studies had been done. The credits, the wetland credits, still needed to be acquired. There was still a cost to that, and we were still at final 3-4 sites, and we had discussed those as okay, that needs to be addressed. They had done the standard above and beyond work to prepare and know what needed to be done for those wetlands. Doug, along with the council, development board, they went ahead and identified which credits needed to be acquired and approved the funding to acquire those credits if and when SK were to choose the site. And that wasn't even something that we had asked them to do. They came back and said, this is what we've done. And we're well, that says a lot, about how much you want this project. So can't speak enough about the technical work done, on the site itself, the work done with the community partners, and they supplied us information that we couldn't get. So there was questions about, you know, certain demographics and who they might want to hire, and that type of data is just not really available. So we were able to get information from the United Way of Bradley County and Chattanooga of people that might be, you know, kind of a target for these types of jobs, and you know, kind of the culture that SK wanted to build. So I mean, it was just a holistic approach, and we couldn't be happier with the decision.
And you know, one of the last little notes on there was childcare. Speaking anecdotally, when it comes to large employers that we're working to recruit to Tennessee, I use this company as a model to say, they're building a child care facility on site. Now, while you may not want to do that necessarily, think about the opportunity to partner with another company and do that, because that is going to set yourself apart. You're going to be able to tap into a workforce that you didn't even know was there, because after COVID, everybody wanted to be able to have that quality of life factor, and the SK people saw that and said, we want to hire employees that, you know, during their lunch break, they can go over and spend time with their child at the child care facility on site. So it was huge. This was a great day, which we mentioned the Pie Center earlier. You better believe that's where we had the announcement.
That's right.
And while we're doing the announcement, there's Doug Barry right there at the podium. And behind him, you see those windows, and that's actually welding bays back there where the workforce that we were told about, you know, all the things that we were shown where it was just, you know, some sawdust and drywall, they were actually in there welding and practicing while we were doing our announcement. So it's like everything kind of came to fruition in that moment.
It's everything you want in a project. I mean, the emotion was there from everybody involved. You know, you had, you know, the grand opening for the Pie Center was like 2 months before the SK announcement, and so to be able to open up the Pie Center, new company announces because of the Pie Center, right? So the fruit of their labor, like years of work to implement this amazing, you know, asset for this community, results in what they had hoped for. Partnership, people are crying, and you know, like everything that I had hoped to accomplish in getting in this career was really embodied that day for that announcement. So it was just fantastic.
It's a great project to work with you.
Good.
And yeah, let's see the headline there.
Yep. That's it. 840 jobs announced. So just fantastic. I know we're right at time. We did good. You know, even with it was a tough act to follow.
I know.
After lunch,
what a great
I'm ready to
speaker
like
at
go
lunch.
walk and like reflect on my own parenting and leadership, and you know, I have to come in and talk about.
Got to get off your ex there, John.
You know, I feel like this embodies our leadership, Ed, as best as we can. But you know, it was just fantastic, and you know, kind of developed a friend along the way, which is always good.
You're a good man.
Do we have time for a question or two? Yeah, you're in charge. If any.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I know you mentioned the project got bigger as it progressed. Did the size requirements, how many acres and other like utilities change as well?
Yes, yeah, it did change. It wasn't, you know, we were always looking at the potential to grow, but it was like that would be a nice to have in terms of like acreage. So we were kind of always, when we initially looked at sites, we prioritized kind of larger acreage, but they didn't need but so much at the beginning. The electrical requirement shifted a little bit, so it was pretty nominal on the utilities. They are actually working with another Newmark team on implementing renewable energy and kind of sustainable practices within the company. So they're still working with TVA on things like that.
And John, it's important to note too that this project, 840 jobs, but a lot of automation still, a lot of machinery. I mean, the processes of making these sandwiches is still very highly automated, but they got a lot of people in there working with love to make it happen.
That's right. It was the job increase that was the biggest question.
Anything else?
Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you all.